The turkey was still warm on the table when Edward slammed his fist down, his face twisted in rage. "Get out of my house, you, and that man," he snarled, the words slicing through the dining room like a blade. Ryland stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs as every eye in the room turned to him, the scent of roasted potatoes and gravy suddenly sickening. Parker sat beside him, hand tightening on the edge of the chair, his usual calm shattered by the outburst that had erupted the moment Ryland had quietly confirmed what everyone had suspected after seeing them arrive together from Chicago. The family home in Naperville, Illinois, had always been the center of holidays, the big colonial, with the wraparound porch where Ryland had grown up riding bikes and learning to throw a football to please his father. Now at 28, he had driven the hour from his apartment with Parker, hoping for understanding, or at least civility. His mother Linda had greeted them with a nervous smile, setting extra plates, while his sister Emily, 25, squeezed his arm in silent support. But his older brother Derek, 32, had eyed Parker with open suspicion, and Edward, the 55-year-old construction firm owner, had barely grunted hello. The tension had built through small talk about the drive and the weather until Ryland could not hold it anymore. He had said, "It's simply Parker and I are together. We have been for 2 years, and I wanted you to know, because you matter to me." Edward had not even let the sentence finish. "This is not how I raised you," he had roared, standing so fast his chair toppled. "Bringing that into my house on Thanksgiving, turning my table into a sideshow." Linda had reached for his arm, whispering please, but he shook her off. Derek nodded along, muttering something about the family name and church friends, while Emily looked between them, tears already forming. Ryland felt a familiar knot in his stomach, the one he had carried since high school when he first realized he was different and hid it under sports and good grades to earn his father's rare nods of approval. Parker stood, then calm but firm. "We can leave if that's what you want, sir, but Ryland is your son?" Edward pointed at the door. "Not anymore, he isn't. Not while he chooses this lifestyle." The walk to the car felt endless, the November wind whipping leaves across the lawn. Ryland barely felt the cold through the numbness. Parker drove in silence, giving him space, while Ryland stared out the window, replaying every family dinner, every hunting trip, every proud moment when Edward had clapped him on the back for closing a deal at the firm or graduating college. How had it come to this? The man who taught him to shake hands firm and look people in the eye now, casting him out like a stranger. Back in their Chicago apartment, the one with the exposed brick and the view of the river, Ryland sank onto the couch, head in hands. "I thought if I showed them how happy I am, they would see it is not a choice," Parker said softly, sitting beside him, rubbing his back. But Ryland shook his head, the guilt already gnawing deep. "They are my family, Parker. I just tore them apart on a day meant for thanks." Parker pulled him close, but the words hung heavy between them, the price of honesty already extracting its first payment. Hours later, Ryland's phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Dad is still yelling, but Mom is crying in the kitchen. I love you both. Please don't disappear." He did not reply right away, the screen blurring as tears finally came. Parker made tea, and they sat up late talking about the future, their shared dreams of maybe adopting one day or traveling, but underneath, Ryland felt the fracture widening. By midnight, he had cried himself dry, wondering if love for Parker truly justified losing the people who had shaped him. The night stretched long, the city lights outside indifferent to the storm inside. Morning light filtered through the apartment curtains, but Ryland barely noticed Parker had left for his teaching job at the high school, leaving a note about dinner later. Alone, Ryland paced the living room, replaying the scene at the table, his father's face contorted in disgust, the way Derek had smirked as if he had always known and waited for the moment to pounce. He picked up his phone again, Emily's text still unread in full, and another from his mother late last night. "Honey, call me when you can. Your father is upset, but we can talk." Upset? The word felt too small for the bomb that had gone off. Ryland dialed his mother's number, but hung up before it rang, the fear of hearing disappointment in her voice too raw. Parker returned that evening, carrying takeout from their favorite Thai place, his face lined with worry after a long day managing rowdy teens. "How are you holding up?" he asked, setting the bags down and pulling Ryland into a hug. Ryland leaned in, breathing in the familiar scent of chalk and cologne, the one constant in the chaos. "I keep thinking about when I was 10 and Dad took me to the Cubs game," he said, voice cracking. "He bought me a hat and said I was his little man. Now I am not even his son." Parker listened without interrupting, then shared his own story of coming out to his parents years earlier in California, how they had struggled but eventually came around after seeing the real him. Not every family gets there right away, he said, but you did the brave thing. The cost is high, though, Rylan replied, pulling away to stare at the city's skyline. What if I lose them forever? What kind of man chooses his boyfriend over blood? They ate in quiet companionship, Parker recounting funny classroom moments to lighten the mood, but Rylan's mind wandered to the internal war raging since college when he met Parker at a mutual friend's art show. Parker had been the first to make him feel seen, not as the son who had to live up to expectations, but as himself. Their first date had been simple coffee, turning into hours of talk about books and dreams, and the weight of small-town expectations. Falling in love had felt like breathing after years underwater, yet every milestone had carried the shadow of what his family would think. Now that shadow had become a wall. The next days blurred into a haze of work at the graphic design firm where Rylan threw himself into deadlines to avoid thinking. Colleagues noticed his distraction, one asking if everything was okay at home, but he brushed it off with a forced smile. At night, the doubts crept in during quiet moments. Was he selfish for wanting acceptance on his terms? Had he rushed the revelation, or should he have kept hiding to keep the peace? Parker sensed the distance and confronted it gently one evening after dinner. I love you, but I won't be the reason you punish yourself, he said. If you need space to process, I understand. Rylan shook his head fiercely. You are not the problem. They are. But even as he said it, the words tasted like half-truth, because deep down he wondered if he could ever fully escape the pull of family approval, the voice in his head echoing his father's sermons about right and wrong. By the end of the week, Rylan had spoken briefly to Emily, who filled him in on the home front. Dad has been quiet at meals, but he told the church group we had a disagreement. Mom is walking on eggshells. Rylan thanked her but hung up feeling more isolated than ever. Parker suggested they take a walk along the lakefront, the cold air clearing his head as they watched boats bob on the water. Whatever happens, we face it together, Parker said, squeezing his hand. Rylan nodded, but inside the trade-off felt unbearable, the joy of authentic love measured against the ache of rejection. Thanksgiving had been the spark, now the fire threatened to consume everything he had built. The family home felt emptier without Rylan, though no one said it aloud. Edward sat at the head of the kitchen table the morning after staring into his coffee as Linda cleared the leftover pie plates, her movements tense. You did what you had to, she said softly, but her eyes betrayed the doubt. Edward set the mug down hard. That boy chose his path, bringing that teacher into our house like it was normal. What will people at the firm say? Derek, what will they say at your job? Derek, who had stayed the night with his wife, nodded from the couch. I told you years ago something was off with him. Always too sensitive. Emily, who had come down for breakfast, slammed her cup. He is our brother. Your son. How can you just erase him? The argument escalated quickly, Edward quoting scripture about family order, while Linda mediated, tears in her eyes. By afternoon, they had removed a few family photos from the mantel, the ones with Rylan smiling at graduations, the gaps like missing teeth in a smile. Across town in Chicago, Rylan stared at his blocked number on his father's phone, the silence louder than any shout. He had tried calling again that morning, only to hear the automated message. Parker was at school, so Rylan filled the day with errands, grocery shopping, laundry, anything to stay busy. At the store, an old high school acquaintance spotted him and made awkward small talk before asking about family holidays. Rylan mumbled something vague, the casual prejudice in the guy's follow-up comment about real men sticking to tradition stinging like salt in a wound. Back home, he scrolled through social media, seeing distant relatives posting perfect Thanksgiving tables, no empty chairs. The exclusion burned. Parker came home to find Rylan on the couch, surrounded by old photo albums. I keep seeing the good times, he admitted, voice thick. The camping trips, the way Dad taught me to drive. Was I wrong to push this? Parker sat beside him, closing the album gently. You were not pushing, you were living. The real betrayal would have been pretending forever and resenting me for it. They talked late into the night, unpacking the layers of Rylan's upbringing, the unspoken rules about masculinity, the community where being different meant whispers at the grocery store. Rylan admitted the moral tangle, how part him still believed he owed his parents obedience, even as another part raged at the unfairness. Parker shared his own past struggles with a father who had eventually accepted him after years of distance, the slow rebuilding that had cost holidays and milestones but gained honesty. The following week brought more cracks. A text from Derek arrived unexpectedly. You embarrassed us all. Don't expect invites anymore. Rylan read it twice, the words landing like punches. He showed Parker, who advised against replying in anger, but Rylan felt the sting of sibling betrayal. The brother, who had once defended him in schoolyard fights, now choosing sides. Work offered little escape. A client meeting, where the conservative executive made offhand comments about traditional values, leaving Rylan biting his tongue to keep the job. That night he broke down in Parker's arms, the weight of societal judgment pressing down. "I am tired of proving I deserve to exist," he whispered. Parker held him tighter, promising they would build their own traditions, the cost of which was already reshaping their lives in ways neither had fully anticipated. December arrived with the first snow dusting Chicago rooftops, turning the city into a postcard Rylan barely appreciated. His promotion at the firm came through a raise and a bigger project, but the victory felt hollow without family to share it. Parker celebrated with a homemade dinner, candles and all, but Rylan kept checking his phone, hoping for a message that never came. The silence from home had stretched into weeks, his mother sending one cautious text about missing him, but stopping short of inviting him back. Rylan replied with a simple, "I miss you too," the words inadequate for the chasm. At the family home in Naperville, Edward threw himself into work, expanding the construction business to avoid the empty chair at meals. Linda tried bridging the gap with secret calls to Rylan, whispering updates while Edward was out. "He is not the same without you," she said, once her voice breaking. "But your father is stubborn. He thinks admitting fault would make him weak." Derek fueled the fire, posting on social media about family values that thinly veiled shots at Rylan, drawing likes from their church circle. Emily confronted him in the driveway one evening, calling it cruel, but Derek shrugged. "Someone has to stand up for what is right." Rylan faced his own moral crossroads at a work holiday party where colleagues brought spouses, and he attended alone, Parker having a school event. A coworker asked about family plans. Rylan lied, saying they were traveling, the half-truth tasting bitter. Later that night, walking home through flurries, he questioned everything. Was his happiness with Parker selfish if it divided the family? Had he underestimated the societal cost? The raised eyebrows at the grocery store, the lost invitations. Parker sensed the growing distance, and they argued for the first time, not loudly, but with quiet hurt. "I feel like I am competing with ghosts," Parker said. Rylan apologized, but the seed of doubt remained, planted by years of conditioning. Mid-month brought a small betrayal when an old college friend distanced himself after hearing through the grapevine about the family split, citing his own conservative upbringing. Rylan sat in the park watching families sled, the laughter mocking his isolation. He called Emily then, who confirmed the home tension was mounting. Linda had skipped a church potluck, pleading headache. The conversations with Parker turned deeper into philosophy of love and duty, Rylan wrestling with whether forgiveness could ever be earned without full acceptance. Parker reminded him of the progress they had made together, the apartment they had furnished, the life they were carving, but Rylan felt the pull of childhood loyalties, the price of autonomy measured in sleepless nights and unspoken what-ifs. The holidays loomed closer, with store windows glowing red and green. Rylan and Parker decorating their apartment modestly, a small tree with ornaments from their travels. Rylan's promotion meant more responsibility, but also more time alone with his thoughts during late nights at the office. Parker planned a quiet Christmas for just them, tickets to a show and home-cooked meals, but Rylan could not shake the what-ifs. One evening, he attended a small pride gathering with Parker, the warmth of community a balm, yet each smiling face reminded him of the family-shaped hole. On the family side, the cracks widened. Linda confronted Edward in the garage one afternoon after finding him staring at old photos. "You are punishing us all," she said. Edward deflected, citing Bible verses and fears of what neighbors would say at the annual block party. Derek backed him up during dinner, calling Rylan's choices a phase that needed tough love. Emily stormed out, texting Rylan later, "I am on your side, but Dad is digging in deeper." Rylan read the message with mixed feelings, the support from his sister a lifeline, the family divide a growing wound. Rylan and Parker's relationship faced its test when Rylan wavered about attending a work event that overlapped with a potential family outreach. Parker felt sidelined, the old fear of being second place surfacing. They talked it through late into the night, Rylan choosing to prioritize their plans, the decision costing him another night of guilt. Work brought its own prejudice, a client pulling a project after learning indirectly about his personal life through small-town gossip networks. Rylan channeled the hurt into his designs, pouring emotion onto digital canvases, the creative outlet his only release. By late December, Rylan had grown in quiet ways. Therapy sessions, Parker encouraged, helping him articulate the internal conflict that tugged between filial duty and self-respect. He decided to host a small gathering for friends, including Parker, the choice affirming his new reality, even as it highlighted the absence of blood family. The family heard whispers through mutual acquaintances, Edward growing quieter. At meals, the first hints of doubt flickering, though pride kept them buried. The rising tension set the stage for what was to come. The decisions each would make carrying heavier consequences than anyone anticipated. Christmas lights twinkled along Michigan Avenue as Rylan and Parker walked hand in hand, the city alive with seasonal cheer. Rylan had thrown himself into finalizing a major campaign at work, the success a distraction from the ache that peaked with every carol on the radio. Parker noticed the strain, suggesting they focus on their chosen family, the friends who had stepped up with invites and support. Yet Rylan could not ignore the void, the memories of past Christmases, with his mother baking pies, and his father carving the ham, now replaced by polite text from Emily. In Naperville, Edward sat alone in his study, the Christmas tree lights reflecting off the window, as he flipped through a family album, stopping at photos of Rylan as a boy. A conversation with an old business partner whose son had passed away, estranged, had shaken him to regret in the man's voice echoing too close. Linda noticed the change, pressing gently, but Edward retreated into routine repairs around the house. Derek sensed the shift and doubled down, inviting church friends over to reinforce the hard line, but Emily pushed back harder, sharing stories of Rylan's kindness, the brother who had helped her through college applications. The family arguments grew heated, the cost of Edward's stance showing in Linda's tired eyes and the empty seat at meals. Rylan received a surprise call from his mother on Christmas Eve morning, her voice hushed. "Your father has been quiet. I think he is thinking about things." Rylan listened, heart pounding, but guarded the years of conditioning making trust fragile. Parker supported him through the call, reminding him of boundaries, the hard-won peace they had built. That afternoon, they prepared a small feast for their circle, the laughter genuine, yet Rylan excused himself once to stare at the snow falling outside, wondering if reconciliation was possible without sacrificing his truth. Edward, meanwhile, drove past the church where he had attended services for decades, the pastor's recent sermon on unconditional love lingering unbidden. He pulled over, gripping the wheel, the internal battle raging between pride and the growing realization that his rejection had fractured more than one life. He searched online for Rylan's address, the first step toward action, though doubt still whispered. The day stretched with preparations in both homes, the parallel lives highlighting the divide, the choices made now demanding their full price in loneliness and longing. Christmas Eve brought a hush over Chicago as snow fell steadily. Rylan and Parker hosting their friends in the warmly lit apartment, the table set with care. Laughter filled the room, stories shared, and toasts made, but Rylan slipped away to the balcony, the cold air sharpening his thoughts. Emily's latest text had hinted at movement at home, but he steeled himself against hope, the past weeks teaching him the pain of false expectations. Parker joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Whatever comes tomorrow, we have this," he said, the words an anchor amid the storm. At the family home, Edward paced the living room, the tree lights casting long shadows. Linda had gone to bed early, her worry evident in the uneaten dinner. Derek had left early with his family, the evening tense after another argument. Alone, Edward replayed the Thanksgiving outburst, the look on Rylan's face haunting him more each day. A call from an old friend whose family had reconciled after similar rifts planted the seed deeper. He grabbed his coat, the decision forming despite the knot of fear. What would people say if he admitted fault? Rylan and Parker turned in early, the apartment quiet save for the soft hum of the heater. Rylan's mind raced through scenarios, the moral weight of potential forgiveness versus protecting the life they had fought for. Parker sensed it, holding him close through the night, the cost of their bond measured in quiet sacrifices and unwavering presence. Morning came with gifts exchanged, and coffee shared, the normalcy a fragile shield against the unknown. Edward drove the familiar route to Chicago, the snow crunching under tires, his mind a whirlwind of justifications and regrets. He had seen the toll on Linda, the way the community whispered the emptiness at church events. Parking outside the apartment building, he sat for long minutes, the plea forming on his lips, the first true admission of error after weeks of denial. The confrontation loomed, the actions of the past months converging in this moment, the price of prejudice laid bare in the winter light. The knock came mid-morning on Christmas Day, Rylan opening the door to find his father standing there, coat dusted with snow, eyes red-rimmed. Edward looked smaller, somehow the commanding presence of the family patriarch cracked. "Son," he started, voice hoarse, "I was wrong." The words hung in the cold air. Rylan, frozen in the doorway, Parker appearing behind him, hand on his shoulder for support. Edward continued the plea, spilling out, "I let fear of what others think blind me. The Bible talks about love, and I forgot that part. Thanksgiving was my mistake, the worst one of my life. Please give me a chance to make it right. Linda misses you. We all do." Ryland stepped aside, letting him in the apartment, feeling suddenly too small for the emotions flooding it. They sat at the table, Edward recounting the sleepless nights, the conversations with Linda, and even Derek, who had begun to waver under the family strain. "I saw how my stubbornness hurt everyone," he said, tears falling freely. "The business suffered because I was distracted. Friends asked questions I could not answer without shame. But mostly I missed my son, the boy I raised, the man you became." Ryland listened, the internal storm, raging, years of hurt, clashing with the longing for this exact moment. Parker stayed quiet, offering presence, not pressure, the cost of his support evident in his steady gaze. Hours passed in raw dialogue, Ryland voicing the betrayal, the nights of doubt, the societal weight that had amplified the rejection. Edward nodded, absorbing each word without defense, the awakening genuine in its vulnerability. Emily and Linda arrived later, the reunion tearful, but cautious, boundaries set by Ryland, no immediate family dinners, just slow steps. Derek sent a text of reluctant apology, the family mending in fragments. As evening fell, Ryland hugged his father, the embrace tentative, the second chance extended but earned through actions, not words alone. The day ended with quiet reflection, Ryland and Parker alone, again the tree lights twinkling. The journey from Thanksgiving rejection to Christmas plea had reshaped them, all the prices paid in tears and growth, the choices made defining futures still unfolding. Was a father's plea a true awakening from prejudice, or simply the convenient regret of a man facing isolation? And did Ryland owe him forgiveness after the deep scars of that Thanksgiving night, or was protecting his peace with Parker the only right path forward?